The river was wide and silent, its brown waters reflecting the dense forest that seemed to stretch without end. In the spring of 1607, 3 small English ships crept into this wilderness, carrying men who dreamed of gold, glory, and a foothold in the New World. They were not the first Europeans to arrive in America, nor would they be the last, but what they were about to build would endure where others had failed. This was Jamestown, the first permanent English settlement in North America, and it would change the destiny of both England and the people who already called this land home. Don't forget to like the video. Our American history series continues, and the story begins now. The story of Jamestown begins decades earlier, with England watching enviously as Spain grew rich from its American conquests. Spanish galleons carried gold and silver across the Atlantic, fueling empires and wars in Europe. England, a smaller and less wealthy kingdom, wanted its share. Queen Elizabeth's sailors, like Francis Drake, had raided Spanish ships and ports, but attempts to establish colonies had failed. The Roanoke colony of the 1580s, remembered as the Lost Colony, had vanished without a trace. The dream of planting an English settlement across the Atlantic remained, but it was haunted by failure. By 1606, under King James I, a group of investors and adventurers revived that dream. They formed the Virginia Company, a joint stock enterprise backed by merchants and nobles who hoped for profit. Their plan was simple: establish a settlement in Virginia, find gold or valuable trade goods, and enrich both themselves and the crown. The Virginia Company gathered 104 men and boys, no women, and loaded them onto 3 ships: the Susan Constant, the Godspeed, and the Discovery. The voyage was long and harsh, crossing the stormy Atlantic before entering Chesapeake Bay. On May 14, 1607, after months at sea, the settlers chose a site on a peninsula along the James River, named for their king. It seemed defensible, surrounded by water on 3 sides, but the swampy ground, brackish water, and thick mosquitoes would soon prove deadly. They built a wooden palisade and crude huts, calling their fragile outpost Jamestown. The men who founded Jamestown were not farmers. Many were gentlemen and used to hard labor, seeking wealth rather than survival. They searched for gold in the soil, scooping dirt into barrels to send back to England, while hunger stalked their camp. The summer heat was brutal, the river water brackish and foul. Mosquitoes carried disease. Food supplies dwindled. By autumn, half of the settlers were dead. Those who survived endured on acorns, roots, and whatever they could trade with the native Powhatan people. The Powhatan Confederacy, led by Chief Powhatan, was a network of tribes numbering perhaps 15,000 people. They grew corn, hunted deer, and lived in villages of thatched houses. They were powerful, organized, and wary of the newcomers. To them, the English were another tribe arriving on their shores, strange, armed, but not invincible. At first, they offered food and aid, curious about these pale strangers. But relations were fragile, built on mistrust and misunderstanding. The English demanded food, sometimes seizing it by force. The Powhatan watched as these men died in droves from hunger and disease, wondering how such people could claim to be powerful. Among the settlers, one man began to emerge as a leader: Captain John Smith. A soldier of fortune with a rough past, Smith was bold, practical, and unafraid to speak against the gentlemen who refused to work. "He that will not work shall not eat," he declared, enforcing discipline in the camp. He organized raids, traded with the Powhatan for corn, and explored the rivers and forests. His leadership kept Jamestown alive when it might have collapsed. Yet his style also created enemies, both among the settlers and with Chief Powhatan, who resented Smith's arrogance. The most famous story from these early years is Smith's capture by Powhatan's men in late 1607. Brought before the chief, Smith later claimed he was about to be executed when Powhatan's young daughter, Pocahontas, intervened and saved his life. Historians debate the truth of this tale. It may have been a misunderstanding of a ritual adoption rather than a dramatic rescue. But the story entered legend, symbolizing the fragile ties between the English and the native people. Pocahontas, only a girl at the time, would become a figure woven into America's founding mythology. Despite moments of cooperation, tensions grew. The English demanded more food than the Powhatan were willing to give, and conflicts erupted. Arrows and muskets were exchanged, fields burned, and hostages taken. By 1609, Jamestown was reinforced with new settlers, including women and children, but conditions worsened. The winter of 1609 to 1610 became known as the Starving Time. The settlers, trapped by Powhatan's warriors and unable to hunt or trade, ate dogs, rats, leather, and in desperate cases, the bodies of the dead. Of the 500 colonists alive in the autumn, only about 60 survived the winter. The colony was on the brink of collapse. In June 1610, the survivors abandoned Jamestown, sailing down the James River to leave America behind. But fate intervened. As they reached the mouth of the river, they encountered a fleet led by Lord War, bringing supplies, soldiers, and strict new leadership. The settlers were ordered back. Jamestown would not be abandoned. With military discipline, new laws, and reinforcements, the colony stabilized. The turning point came with tobacco. In 1612, John Rolfe, an English settler, began experimenting with a strain of tobacco from the Caribbean. The native Virginia tobacco was harsh, but Rolfe's hybrid produced a sweeter leaf that became wildly popular in Europe. Tobacco became Virginia's gold, a cash crop that would sustain the colony and draw thousands of settlers. Fields were cleared, labor demanded, and shipments to England grew. Tobacco tied the colony to success, but it also planted the seeds of dependency on land and labor that would shape America's future. The Powhatan, however, saw their lands consumed, their people threatened, and their power challenged. At first, Chief Powhatan tried to maintain an uneasy peace, even marrying his daughter Pocahontas to John Rolfe in 1614, a union that brought several years of calm. Pocahontas traveled to England, baptized as Rebecca, and was presented at court as proof of the success of English civilizing efforts. But she died young, in 1617, never returning to her homeland. By the 1620s, violence erupted again. The Powhatan launched attacks in 1622, killing hundreds of colonists, but the English, reinforced by waves of settlers and backed by the crown, would not be dislodged. The Powhatan world began to collapse, their numbers reduced by war and disease. For the English, Jamestown was no longer just an experiment. It was the foundation of a colony that would grow into Virginia and eventually into a nation. The Jamestown story is one of survival against odds, of greed and hunger, of cultural clash and fragile cooperation. It was a place of suffering where more settlers died than lived, but it endured. From its muddy riverbanks, tobacco fields, and wooden palisades emerged the first chapter of English America. The ideals and conflicts born there, labor, land, relations with native peoples, the search for wealth, and the struggle for survival, would echo through centuries of American history. This was episode 2 of our American History series. In the next episode, we'll cover the Pilgrims and Plymouth Colony. Subscribe for more history stories.